So they've just announced some undercard fights for the Wilder Fury rematch. And I'm seeing a lot of boxing fans ridiculing the quality of this undercard, saying that it's terrible. Well, if we head on over to the BoxRec page here, you'll see two of the fights that they've announced so far. Emmanuel Navarrete versus Gio Santissima. Sebastian Fundora versus Daniel Lewis. I don't know any of these fighters, by the way. I've heard of Navarrete. I don't think I've ever seen him before. But the others, I don't know them. But another fight which they say they're going to put on this show, according to this Boxing Scene article, will be a co-main event. I don't know how on earth this can be a co-main event, but it will be Charles Martin versus Gerald Washington in an IBF title eliminator. Now, I know a lot of people are slating this undercard, but personally for me, I think Charles Martin versus Gerald Washington is a fun little fight. As I've said on this channel for many, many years, there is fun and entertainment to be had at all levels in boxing. Doesn't have to be an elite level fight for me to enjoy it. I mean, for example, I was quite looking forward to watching Dave Allen versus Nick Webb. Right? That's really an area level heavyweight fight. But I was looking forward to that and it turned out to be fun. I enjoy watching most of David Price's fights. So, as I say, there's fun to be had at all levels. And I think we might have some fun with this Charles Martin, Gerald Washington fight. Now, really and truly, Charles Martin should win this one, but Gerald Washington may put up some type of resistance. Martin is the much tougher of the two. He takes a better shot. He's got a stronger will, which isn't difficult when you're going up against Gerald Washington because that's one of his main weaknesses. He doesn't have a very strong will. Gerald Washington comes across as a very nice guy outside the ring, which is great, but he also comes across as a nice guy inside the ring, which is not so great. And even though he can box a little bit, that has been his downfall time and time again, Gerald Washington. Early on in his career, when he was still unbeaten, he fought a guy called Nagy Aguilera, who's a journeyman. And Gerald Washington fought like he was absolutely terrified of Nagy Aguilera. Terrified of him. He ended up getting, was it a draw that he got with Nagy Aguilera or a win? I can't remember now. I think it might have been a win. But he was booed. Okay, because people did not like the decision. They thought that Nagy Aguilera won. And that was the first sign that Gerald Washington maybe doesn't quite have the heart or the spirit for this game. Then he fought Amir Mansour, and he was winning handily in the early rounds against Mansour, outboxing him. But in the second half of the fight, he just went into his shell, and he allowed Mansour to come back into it. And I think that was the one where it was a draw. It was the Mansour fight rather than the Aguilera fight, I seem to remember now. And it's like, what the hell's wrong with Gerald Washington? This big guy, 6'6", and he's fighting somebody who he's beating handily. But then he just allows this person back into the fight to the point where they end up getting a draw. And in fact, many people feel like Amir Mansour won the fight. Then, of course, Washington fights Wilder. He capitulated in the Wilder fight eventually. He was outboxing Wilder for a few rounds. So Gerald Washington can box a little bit. He's not Tyson Fury, but he can box a little bit. He was outboxing Wilder until he got clipped. Then, of course, he went in there against Gerald Miller and got overwhelmed, beaten up in that fight and stopped. Then he fought Kaunaki, and it was even worse for him in the Kaunaki fight because he got stopped early in that particular contest. Again, whenever Gerald Washington is up against adversity in a fight, he tends to capitulate. However, in his last fight against Robert Helenius, he was in tough again. Helenius was looking like he was going to win the fight. Both guys were kind of busted up. But Helenius has a history of gassing, and he gassed again against Gerald Washington. And Washington was able to come through and score a knockout in a very, very tough contest for him. That was the first time I've really seen Gerald Washington manage to overcome serious adversity in a fight and actually win. And that might give him some confidence going into the Charles Martin fight, because sometimes a fighter can turn a corner psychologically where they're used to capitulating under pressure. They get flashbacks of the last time they got stopped. But when they go through a tough fight and this time they don't get stopped, but they actually stop the other guy, as I say, it can be the turning of a corner for them psychologically, because next time they get in that situation where they're in a tough spot, they can actually dig in a bit more because they now have the memory of being able to overcome these type of circumstances before. So maybe Gerald Washington will be a bit more stubborn here against Charles Martin. So I think it's a fun fight. Charles Martin, not the technically best heavyweight in the world, but he is tough. He showed that in the Adam Kaunaki fight. I mean, compare Charles Martin's performance against Kaunaki to Washington's performance against Kaunaki, and it's night and day in terms of who the tougher guy is. Yeah, Charles Martin definitely tougher, takes a better shot. He's got more grit about him. And in his last couple performances, he hasn't been fighting anybody great. I think he fought Daniel Martz and Greg Corbin and got stoppages in both those fights. And he looked like he meant business. Even though it's poor level opposition, he was going in there really, trying to throw some hard, spiteful punches. And of course, he's trained by Manny Robles these days, and he's actually sparred Andy Ruiz. I want to say over the past year or so, he's been sparring Andy Ruiz. So Ruiz is nothing like Gerald Washington, but nonetheless, in terms of preparing yourself and getting battle hardened and, ring ready, that will have served Charles Martin quite well, being a regular sparring partner of Andy Ruiz. So yeah, I'm expecting Charles Martin to win, but he might find it a little difficult. It's a 12-round fight, so he's got plenty of time to get to Gerald Washington. He might find it a little difficult, particularly in the early going with Gerald Washington, I think, having the longer arms than Charles Martin. Both guys are tall. Charles Martin's 6'5", and Gerald Washington is 6'6". Let me see what the reaches are if they have them here. It says, 80-inch reach for Charles Martin. What's Gerald Washington's reach? That's if the reaches even are accurate, because with BoxRec, the measurements are not always accurate. Okay, slightly more reach for Gerald Washington, but of course we don't know the arm length. That's only the reach measurement. And interestingly, of course, Charles Martin significantly younger than Gerald Washington, who's 37 years old now. Charles Martin, 33. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm sure a lot of you are going to ridicule this fight and say it's a joke. Look, it's not the strongest undercard in the world. I'm not going to try and kid you and lie to you and act like it is. But for what it's worth, I think Charles Martin versus Washington is a fun little fight. So yeah, I'm going to take Charles Martin to win. I reckon he might stop Gerald Washington late. After having a few, awkward moments, trying to figure Gerald Washington's style out, I think Charles Martin might wear Gerald Washington down late, because Charles Martin can throw a lot of punches as well. Certainly against Greg Corbin, he was letting his hands go. He was very spiteful, throwing all kinds of shots. And we saw in the Kaunaki fight late against Kaunaki, after Martin had really been taking a beating through the first, half or even 2/3 of the fight. Late in that fight, he staged the rally and he was able to stun Kaunaki in the back end of that fight. And that was actually a really good scrap. The final few rounds of Charles Martin Kaunaki were actually really good to watch. I wouldn't even mind seeing them run it back, truth be told. So, yeah, I think Charles Martin's probably going to get to Gerald Washington later on in the fight, take him out. Washington, again, might be a little more confident than usual and slightly more stubborn than usual because of the fact that he overcame adversity in his last fight. But ultimately, I just think Charles Martin will have a little bit too much for him. So, yeah, Gerald Washington is one of those kind of guys where you look at him and you think physically, he's got a lot of ability. He's pretty athletic, fairly well coordinated. His technique is not bad, but he just doesn't have it inside of him. It's kind of like, who's that guy? I forget his name now. The Ukrainian heavyweight. He looks like Dolph Lundgren, who's been beaten up by everybody. Dimitrenko. Same kind of fighter as Dimitrenko. Dimitrenko, big, tall, athletic guy, but just doesn't have it inside of him. Doesn't have that fighting spirit, I personally think Gerald Washington's probably a little technically better than Dimitrenko, a little more athletically gifted and talented, but a similar kind of lack of fighting spirit, unfortunately for him. Yeah, let me know what you think, people. What's happening? I'm out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.